Neverwinter wasn't the first MMO to be released based on Dungeons & Dragons, but given the dismal subscription numbers of 2006's Dungeons & Dragons Online, it was the first D&D MMO to be released as a free-to-play title from day one. Like Star Trek Online, this game was developed by Cryptic Studios, and thankfully the ground combat in this game is much better. The game's mechanics are derived from the 4th edition of D&D's rulebook, and it's set in the popular Forgotten Realms campaign setting, with the city of Neverwinter serving as the main hub for players. There were some legal troubles over the rights to the D&D license, and the sale of Cryptic Studios from Atari to Perfect World also delayed the game's release, but it eventually launched in 2013, and it was greeted with lukewarm reviews. The 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons rule set was one where your choice of class was crucial to determining your role in combat, and one of the good things about this game is that it stays true to that. Rogues tend to be very good at dealing damage to one enemy at a time, while wizards should focus on control or targeting groups of enemies. Fighters can be melee DPS or tanks, but not both. You don't want to draw too much aggro if you're a great weapon fighter, but if you're a guardian fighter, be prepared to generate threat and hide behind your tower shield constantly. What all this means is that the game really does get better when you're playing with a group. It's still possible to run through the quest solo, but combat in general works out better when you have other players who know their roles well and can make up for your class's weaknesses. In this sense, the game does feel like D&D and does better than most when it comes to encouraging social interaction. Unfortunately, there are still some issues with the character classes. One problem is that when you hit level 20, you can choose a Paragon path that's supposed to allow you to focus on one of two roles in combat. But it often feels like one choice is obviously better than the other. The Control Wizard can choose Master of Flame to specialize in DPS, or Spellstorm Mage to specialize in Control. But the name of the class is Control Wizard. So why would you pick Master of Flame? If you want ranged DPS, you should be playing a Scourge Warlock instead. This isn't as bad as the Oathbound Paladin though, which tries to give you the option to be a healer or a tank. But they can't tank as well as the Guardian Fighter, and they can't heal as well as the Devoted Cleric. Worst of all though, great weapon fighters. Even if you choose the melee DPS Paragon path that you're supposed to pick, they won't last very long in combat because they can't avoid attacks as effectively as other melee DPS classes, namely the Hunter Rangers and the Trickster Rogues. Rangers get a short-range teleport, and Rogues get a tumble ability to avoid damage, and the game gives you credit for dodging an area of effect attack with these abilities, even if you didn't quite get out of the area before that attack landed. Great weapon fighters get the sprint ability instead. And this is great for getting close to enemies quickly, but it's not so great if you follow the game's advice and try to use it to avoid damage. Basically, don't try to customize in this game, find a build and stick with it. On to what's good about this game for free players. Like Star Trek Online, Neverwinter is a game that you can play through comfortably while ignoring the existence of the cash shop. There is definitely plenty of high-powered gear that you can buy using real money, but there's also a decent amount of rare items that you can get with cost-free grinding. The best system in place for that is probably the seals. Each combat zone surrounding Neverwinter has a distinct flavor of enemies that all drop a kind of vendor trash that they have in common. Each zone also has a bounty NPC who will take that vendor trash and give you a seal for it. Collect enough of the right seals, and you can use them to buy higher quality gear in the city of Neverwinter. This takes the tedious task of killing mobs and makes it rewarding, and you don't even have to farm specific creatures for specific vendor trash. Just kill any mob in your zone of choice and you'll make progress towards your rare items. What's bad as a free-to-play player? First of all, you only have 2 character slots, and the game only has 1 server, so you can pretty much forget about making alts. Also, some items that make the game easier at high levels are ridiculously overpriced unless you pay cash for them. The biggest example of this are the companions. You can get a common quality companion at level 16, but that companion's max level is 20. By the time your character hits level 40, your new friend is going to be dying a lot. So you're going to want to buy a companion that's uncommon quality or better, or a companion quality upgrade for your existing common companion. Either option will cost you hundreds of thousands of Astral Diamonds. You get Astral Diamonds by completing daily quests, but you have to refine these diamonds before you can spend them, and you can only refine 24,000 per day. This means that you'll have to spend 2 straight weeks of farming Astral Diamonds just to get an upgrade that will increase your companion's max level by 5. All things considered, Neverwinter isn't a bad game. Unfortunately, the medieval fantasy sandbox is extremely common as a genre among MMOs, and Neverwinter really doesn't do enough to distinguish itself from all the other offerings out there. Part of the problem is that it doesn't do enough with the D&D license. Past video games like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights allowed players to find solutions other than fighting to solve problems, just like you can when you play tabletop D&D. The Neverwinter MMO, however, is all about combat, and it doesn't even have memorable NPCs to go with it. Add that to the fact that the game's economy is weighted heavily in favor of buying things with cash, and there's a good chance that you'll get bored with it or frustrated before you hit max level. It can definitely be fun if you have a group to play with, but it's not something I'd recommend for solo players. The best D&D games out there for solo players are still Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights.